a little over 2 years following, until the harvest of the 51st, or the year after the Jubilee. Jehovah's special blessing on the 6th year resulted in a crop yield sufficient to furnish food through the Sabbath year. 25. 20-22 Similarly, God provided bountiful and sufficient harvest in the 48th year to supply the nation through the Sabbath year, the Jubilee that followed, and the next year until harvest time, if the Jews kept his law. The Jubilee was in a sense an entire year of festival, a year of liberty. The keeping of it would demonstrate Israel's faith in their God Jehovah and would be a time of thanksgiving and happiness in his provisions. It was on the 10th day of the 7th month in the month of Tishri, on the Day of Atonement, that the horn Shomiddle.Far, or Shumiddle.Far, a curved, animal horn was sounded, proclaiming liberty throughout the land. This meant freedom for the Hebrew slaves, many of whom had sold themselves because of debt. Such release normally would not come until the 7th year of servitude x 21. 2. But the Jubilee provided liberty even for those who had not yet served for 6 years. All hereditary land possessions that had been sold usually because of financial reverses were returned, and each man returned to his family and his ancestral possession. No family was to sink into the depths of perpetual poverty. Every family was to have its honor and respect. Even a person who squandered his substance could not forever lose his inheritance for his posterity. After all, the land was really Jehovah's, and the Israelites themselves were alien residents and settlers from Jehovah's standpoint. 25. 23, 24 If the nation kept God's laws, then, as he said, no one should come to be poor among you. 25. 8-10, 13. 15. 4, 5. By reason of the Jubilee law, none of the land could be sold in perpetuity. God provided that if a man sold any land of his hereditary possession, the sale price was to be gauged according to the number of years left until the Jubilee. The same rate was in effect when hereditary land was repurchased by its owner. In effect, a sale of land, therefore, was actually only the sale of the use of the land and its produce for the number of years left until Jubilee year. 25. 15, 16, 23-28 This applied to houses in unwalled settlements, which were counted as the open country. But houses in walled cities were not included in property returned at Jubilee. Exceptions to it were the houses of the Levites, whose only possessions were the houses and the pasture grounds around the Levite cities. These had their houses returned at Jubilee. The pasture textoi acute miritra longo, Judah 123 of the ground, and with the education that was provided, Israel, while obedient, would enjoy the perfect government and prosperity that only the true theocracy could provide. Issa 33. 22. The law was read to the people on Sabbath years, particularly during the festival of booths, or ingathering. 31. 10-12 They should thereby have been drawn closer to Jehovah and should have maintained their freedom. Jehovah warned the Israelites that they would suffer tragedy if they were disobedient and repeatedly ignored his laws, which included those pertaining to the Sabbath and Jubilee years. 26. 27-45 Starting the count of years with the entry of the Israelites into the Promised Land, their first Jubilee year began in Tishri of 1424 BCE. 25. 2-4, 8-10 Between the time of entering the Promised Land in 1473 BCE and the fall of Jerusalem in 607 BCE, the Israelites were obligated to celebrate 17 Jubilees. But it is a sad commentary on their history that they did not appreciate Jehovah as their king. They eventually violated his commands, including the Sabbath laws, and suffered the loss of the blessings he arranged for them. Their failure brought reproach on God before the nations of the world and hindered them from realizing the excellence of his theocratic government. 2ch 36. 20, 21. Symbolic meaning. There are allusions to the Jubilee arrangement in the Christian Greek scriptures. Jesus Christ said he came to preach a release to the captives. 4. 16-18 He later said with regard to liberation from bondage to sin, if the Son sets you free, you will be actually free. Joe 8. 36 Because Spirit-anointed Christians were declared righteous for life and were begotten as sons of God beginning with Pentecost of 33 CE, the Apostle Paul could thereafter write, the law of that Spirit which gives life in union with Christ Jesus has set you free from the law of sin and of death. Row 8. 2 during Christ's 1,000-year reign, others, 2, as indicated at Romans 8. 19-21, will be set free from enslavement to corruption and, after proving their loyalty to Jehovah under test, will have the glorious freedom of the children of God. They will be liberated from inborn sin and from the death to which it leads. The custody of the earth itself will be returned to true worshippers, to be cared for in harmony with Jehovah's original purpose for mankind. Re 21. 4. Ge 1. 28. Issa 65. 21-25. Jukal, a shortened form of Jukal, meaning Jehovah is able. Jehovah prevails. Son of Shelemiah. One of the princes of Judah who asked that the prophet Jeremiah be executed for weakening the hands of the warriors. Jer 38. 1-4. Judah lauded. Object of laudation. 1. Jacob's fourth son by his wife Leah. Ge 29. 35. 1 Ch 2. 1 After spending about 9 years of his life at Haran in Padanaram, Judah was taken with all of Jacob's household to Canaan. Compare Ge 29. 4, 5, 32-35. 30. 9-12, 16-28. 31. 17, 18, 41. Subsequently he resided with his father at Succoth and then at Shechem. After his sister Dinah was violated by Hamor's son, and Simeon and Levi had avenged her by killing all the males of Shechem, Judah evidently shared in plundering the city. Ge 33. 17, 18. 34. 1, 2, 25-29. Relationship to Joseph. In the course of time, because Jacob favored him, Joseph came to be hated by Judah and his other half-brothers. Their hatred intensified after Joseph related 2 dreams that pointed to his becoming their superior. Therefore, when Jacob sent Joseph to check on his half-brothers as they cared for the flocks, they, upon seeing him from a distance, plotted to kill him. But at the suggestion of Reuben, who had in mind saving Joseph's life, they pitched him into a dry water pit. Ge 37. 2-24. Thereafter, as a caravan of Ishmaelites came into view, Judah, apparently in Reuben's absence, convinced the others that, instead of murdering Joseph, it would be better to sell Otex to Acute Longo, Judah 124 second son, Onan, to perform brother-in-law marriage. But Onan, although having relations with Tamar, wasted his semen on the earth so as not to give offspring to his brother. For this Jehovah also slew him. Judah then recommended that Tamar return to her father's house and wait until Shelah matured. Yet, even after Shelah had grown up, Judah, seemingly reasoning that his youngest son might die, did not give him in marriage to Tamar. Ge 38. 6-11, 14. Therefore, subsequent to Judah's becoming a widower, Tamar, on learning that her father-in-law was going to Timnah, disguised herself as a prostitute and then seated herself at the entrance of Enaim on the road Judah would be traversing. Not recognizing his daughter-in-law and assuming her to be a prostitute, Judah had relations with her. When it later came to light that Tamar was pregnant, Judah demanded that she be burned as a harlot. But upon the presentation of the evidence that he himself had made her pregnant, Judah exclaimed, "She's more righteous than I am, for the reason that I did not give her to Shelah my son." Thus unwittingly Judah had taken the place of Shelah in fathering legal offspring. Some 6 months later Tamar gave birth to the twins Perez and Zerah. Judah had no further relations with her. Ge 38. 12-30. To Egypt for food. Sometime later reports reached famine-stricken Canaan that food was available in Egypt. Consequently, at Jacob's direction, 10 of his sons, including Judah, went there for food. At this time their half-brother Joseph was serving as Egypt's food administrator. Whereas Joseph immediately knew them, they did not recognize him. Joseph accused them of being spies and warned them not to return without Benjamin, whom they mentioned in denying that they were spies. Joseph also had one of his half-brothers, Simeon, bound and held as a hostage. Ge 42. 1-25. Understandably, Jacob, presuming that he had lost both Joseph and Simeon, was unwilling to let Benjamin accompany his other sons to Egypt. Reuben's emotional statement that Jacob could put his own two sons to death if he did not return Benjamin carried insufficient weight, perhaps because he had proved himself to be unreliable by violating his father's concubine. GE 35. 22 Finally Judah succeeded in getting his father's consent by promising to be surety for Benjamin. GE 42. 36-38. 43. 8-14. Homeward bound, after having bought cereals in Egypt, Jacob's sons were overtaken by Joseph's steward and accused of theft, actually a ruse by Joseph. When the supposedly stolen item was found in Benjamin's bag, the men returned and entered Joseph's house. It was Judah who then answered the charge and eloquently and earnestly pleaded in behalf of Benjamin and for the sake of his father, requesting that he be constituted a slave in Benjamin's stead. So moved was Joseph by Judah's sincere plea that he could no longer control his emotions. Thereafter, alone with his brothers, Joseph identified himself. After pardoning them for having sold him into slavery, Joseph instructed his half-brothers to get Jacob and then return to Egypt, as the famine was to continue for 5 more years. GE 44. 1. 45. 13. Later, as Jacob and his entire household neared Egypt, Jacob sent Judah in advance of him to Joseph to impart information ahead of him to Goshen. GE 46. 28. Superior among his brothers. By his concern for his aged father and his noble effort to preserve Benjamin's freedom at the cost of his own, Judah proved himself to be superior among his brothers. 1 ch. 5. 2 No longer was he the Judah who in his youth had shared in plundering the Shechemites and who had been party to wronging his half-brother Joseph and then deceiving his own father. His fine qualities of leadership entitled Judah, as one of the heads of the 12 tribes of Israel, to receive a superior prophetic blessing from his dying father. GE 49. 8-12 Its fulfillment is considered below. O textoi acute miritra longo, Judah 125 share in conquering the land allotted to Judah. The tribe itself was divinely designated to take the lead in the fight against the Canaanites, and it did so in association with the Simeonites. New 13. 6, 30. 14. 6-10, 38. Jos 14. 6-14. 15. 13-20. JG 1. 1-20. Compared to 33. 7. Later, Judah, again on the basis of divine authorization, led the punitive military action against Benjamin. JG 20. 18. Judah's inheritance. The territory allotted to the tribe of Judah was bounded by Benjamite and Onite territories on the end. Jos 15. 5-11. 18. 11. The Salt Sea Dead Sea on the E. Jos 15. 5. And the Great Sea Mediterranean on the W. Jos 15. 12. The S boundary appears to have extended in a southwesterly direction from the southernmost point of the Dead Sea to the ascent of Akrabim. Proceeding from there, it continued over to Zin, ran northward near Kadesh Barnea, and finally crossed over to the Mediterranean by way of Hezron, Adda, Karka, Asman, and the Torrent Valley of Egypt. Jos 15. 1-4 The portion of this territory centering primarily around Beersheba was assigned to the Simeonites. Jos 19. 1-9 The Kenates, a non-Israelite family related to Moses by marriage, also began residing in Judean territory. JG 1. 16. Several distinct natural regions were within the assigned boundaries of ancient Judah. The Negev, much of which is a plateau between 450 and 600 meters, 1,500 and 2,000 feet above sea level, lies to the east along the Mediterranean stretches the plain of Philistia, with its sand dunes that sometimes penetrate the shore for as much as 6 kilometers 3.5 mi. In early times this rolling plain was a region of vineyards, olive groves, and grain fields. JG 15. 5 Just east of it rises a hilly area, cleft by numerous valleys, that attains an altitude of about 450 meters, 1,500 feet above sea level in the east. This is the Shephelah, meaning lowland, a region anciently covered with sycamore trees. 1 Chi 10. 27 It is a lowland when compared with the mountainous region of Judah, which lies farther to the east and has elevations varying from about 600 to more than 1,000 meters, 2,000 to 3,300 feet above sea level. The barren hills occupying the eastern slope of the Judean mountains constitute the wilderness of Judah. Under the leadership of Joshua, the power of the Canaanites had apparently been broken in the territory given to Judah. However, since evidently no garrisons were established, the original inhabitants appear to have returned to such cities as Hebron and Geber, probably while the Israelites were warring elsewhere. Therefore, these places had to be recaptured. Compare Joes 12. 7, 10, 13. JG 1. 10-15. But the inhabitants of the lower plain, with their well-equipped chariotry, were not dispossessed. This doubtless included the Philistines of Gath and Ashdod. Joes 13. 2, 3. JG 1. 18, 19. From the Judges to Saul. During the turbulent period of the Judges, Judah, like the other tribes, repeatedly fell victim to idolatry. Therefore, Jehovah allowed surrounding nations, particularly the Ammonites and the Philistines, to make inroads on the territory of Judah. JG 10. 6-9 In Samson's day, not only had the Judeans lost all control over the Philistine cities of Gaza, Ekron, and Ashkelon, but the Philistines had actually become their overlords. JG 15. 9-12 Apparently not until Samuel's time was Judean territory recovered from the Philistines. 1-7. 10-14. After Saul of the tribe of Benjamin was anointed by Samuel as Israel's first king, the Judeans fought loyally under his leadership. 1-11. 5-11. 15. 3. Foremost frequent were the battles against the Philistines. 1-14. 52, who again seemed to have got the upper hand over the Israelites. 1-13. 19-22 But gradually their power was reduced. With Jehovah's help, Saul and his son Jonathan gained victories over them in the area extending from Michmash to Ajalon. 1-13. 23. 14. 23, 31 When the Philistines later invaded Judah, they again suffered defeat. O text to acute Miritra Longo. Judah 126 Abner, defected to David. Not long thereafter Ishbosheth was murdered. 2-2. 1-4, 8, 9. 3. 1. 4. 12. When David subsequently gained the kingship over all Israel, the sons of Jacob, that is, all the tribes of Israel, lauded Judah and prostrated themselves to his representative as ruler. Therefore, David was also able to move against Jerusalem, though it was basically in Benjamite territory and, after capturing the stronghold of Zion, to make it his capital. For the most part David conducted himself in a commendable way. So through him, the tribe of Judah was lauded for such qualities as justice and righteousness, and also for its services to the nation, including the maintenance of national security, as Jacob had foretold in his deathbed blessing. The hand of Judah was truly on the back of his enemies as David subdued the Philistines, who had twice sought to overthrow him as king in Zion, as well as the Moabites, Syrians, Edomites, Amalekites, and Ammonites. Thus, under David, Israel's boundaries were at last extended to their God-ordained limits. G 49. 8-12. 2-5. 1-10, 17-25. 8. 1-15. 12. 29-31. By reason of the everlasting covenant for a kingdom made with David, the tribe of Judah possessed the scepter and the commander's staff for 470 years. G 49. 10. 2-7. 16 But only during the reigns of David and Solomon was there a united kingdom, with all the tribes of Israel prostrating themselves before Judah. On account of Solomon's apostatizing toward the close of his reign, Jehovah ripped 10 tribes away from the next Judean king, Hoboam, and gave these to Jeroboam. 1 Kings 11. 31-35. 12. 15-20 Only the Levites and the tribes of Benjamin and Judah remained loyal to the house of David. 1 Kings 12. 21. 2 Ch 13. 9, 10. 3. Judah as a kingdom, including the tribe of Benjamin. 2 ch 25. 5 After Solomon's death, the other 10 tribes formed an independent kingdom under the Ephraimic Jeroboam. Not long thereafter, in the 5th year of Rehoboam, Egypt's king Shishak invaded the kingdom of Judah as far as Jerusalem and captured fortified cities en route. 1 Kai 14. 25, 26. 2 ch 12. 2-9. For a period of some 40 years during the reigns of Judean kings Rehoboam, Abijam, Abijah, and Asa, repeated conflicts occurred between the kingdoms of Judah and Israel. 1 Kai 14. 30. 15. 7, 16 But Asa's successor Jehoshaphat had formed a marriage alliance with wicked King Ahab of Israel. While this meant peace between the two kingdoms, the marriage of Jehoshaphat's son Jehoram to Ahab's daughter Athaliah proved to be disastrous for Judah. Under Athaliah's influence, Jehoram became guilty of rank apostasy. During his reign the Philistines and the Arabs invaded Judah and took captive and killed all of his sons except Ahijah, the youngest. When Ahaziah became king, he likewise followed the directives of wicked Athaliah. After Ahaziah's violent death, Athaliah killed all the royal offspring. But, undoubtedly by divine providence, the infant Jehoash, rightful heir to the throne of David, was hidden and therefore survived. Meanwhile the usurper Athaliah ruled as queen until her execution at the command of high priest Shahada. 2 ch 18. 1. 21. 1, 5, 6, 16, 17. 22. 1-3, 9-12. 23. 13-15. Though his reign started out well, Jehoash departed from true worship after the death of high priest Shahada. 2 ch 24. 2, 17, 18 Jehoash's son, Amaziah, likewise failed to continue in a righteous course. During his reign, after years of peaceful coexistence, the 10-tribe kingdom and the kingdom of Judah again met in battle, with the latter suffering a humiliating defeat. 2 ch 25. 1, 2, 14-24 With the exception of his invading the sanctuary, the next Judean king, Azariah, did what was right in Jehovah's eyes. His successor Jotham proved to be a faithful king. But Jotham's son Ahaz became notorious for practicing large-scale idolatry. 2 ch 26. 3, 4, 16-20. 27. 1, 2. 28. 1-4. During Ahaz's reign Judah suffered otextoi acute neuritra longo. Judah 127 took religious reforms. 2 ch 33. 10-16 But his son Amin reverted to idolatry. 2 ch 33. 21-24. The last sweeping campaign against idolatry came during the reign of Amin's son Josiah. However, it was then too late for genuine repentance to be effected among the people in general. Therefore, Jehovah decreed the complete desolation of Judah and Jerusalem. Finally, Josiah himself was killed in an attempt to turn the Egyptian forces back at Megiddo as they were on their way to assist the king of Assyria at Carchemish. 2 Kai 22. 1. 23. 30. 2 ch 35. 20. The last 4 Judean kings, Jehoahaz, Joachim, Joachim, and Zedekiah proved to be bad rulers. Pharaoh Necho deposed Jehoahaz, laid a heavy fine on the land of Judah, and made Jehoahaz's brother Joachim king. 2 Kai 23. 31-35 Later, apparently after 8 years of his reign, Joachim was made a vassal to Nebuchadnezzar king of Babylon, who had earlier defeated the Egyptians at Carchemish. For 3 years Joachim served the king of Babylon but then rebelled. 2 Kai 24. 1. Jah 46. 2 Thereafter Nebuchadnezzar, evidently intending to take the rebellious king as a prisoner to Babylon, came against Jerusalem. 2 ch 36. 6 However, Joachim never was taken to Babylon, for he died in a manner not disclosed in the Bible. Subsequently Joachim became king. After ruling for only 3 months and 10 days, he voluntarily surrendered to Nebuchadnezzar and, along with other members of the royal family and thousands of his subjects, went into Babylonian exile. Then Nebuchadnezzar placed Joachim's uncle, Zedekiah, on the throne of Judah. 2 Chi 24. 6, 8-17. 2 Ch 36. 9, 10. In his 9th year as vassal king, Zedekiah rebelled and looked to Egypt's military might for support against Babylon. 2 Chi 24. 18. 25. 1. 2 Ch 36. 11-13. S 17. 15-21 Nebuchadnezzar, therefore, marched his armies toward Judah. For 18 months Jerusalem was subjected to siege until its walls were finally breached. Although Zedekiah fled, he was captured, his sons were slaughtered before him, and he was then blinded. The next month most of the survivors were taken into exile. Over the few remaining lowly people of Judah, Gedaliah was appointed as governor. But following his assassination, the people fled to Egypt. Thus in the 7th month of 607 BCE the land of Judah was completely desolated. 2 Chi 25. 1-26. For details see articles on the individual kings. Rulership not lost. This calamitous end for the kingdom of Judah, however, did not mean that the scepter and commander's staff had departed from the tribe for all time. According to Jacob's deathbed prophecy, the tribe of Judah was to produce the permanent royal heir, Zelo meaning he whose it is. He to whom it belongs. Ge 49. 10 Appropriately, therefore, before the overthrow of the kingdom of Judah, Jehovah, through Ezekiel, directed these words to Zedekiah. Remove the turban, and lift off the crown. This will not be the same. Put on high even what is low, and bring low even the high one. A ruin I shall make it. As for this also, it will certainly become no one's until he comes who has the legal right, and I must give it to him. As 21. 26, 27 The one having a legal right, as indicated by the angel Gabriel's announcement to the virgin Jewess Mary some 600 years later, is none other than Jesus, the Son of God. Luke 1. 31-33 It is, therefore, fitting that Jesus Christ bears the title the Lion that is of the tribe of Judah. 5. Compared with the northern kingdom. The kingdom of Judah enjoyed far greater stability and also lasted about 133 years longer than did the northern kingdom. Several factors contributed to this. 1 On account of God's covenant with David, the royal line remained unbroken, whereas in the northern kingdom fewer than half of the kings had their own sons succeed them. 2 The continuance of the Aaronic priesthood at the temple in Jerusalem had Jehovah's blessing o textoi acute miritra longo, Judah, wilderness of 128 1. 1-4. Isra 11. 12 In fulfillment of Ezekiel 21. 27 Never did a king of the Davidic line administer the affairs of the repatriated people. It is also noteworthy that no mention is made of tribal jealousies, indicating that Ephraim and Judah had indeed become one. Isra 11. 4. Apparently the same as the Levite Hodaviah, or Hotiva, whose sons returned to Jerusalem with Zerubbabel. As 2. 3. 9. Ne 7. 43. 5. Levite listed among those returning with Zerubbabel. Ne 12. 1, 8. 6. Levite among those dismissing their foreign wives and sons. As 10. 23, 44. 7. A Benjamite resident of Jerusalem serving there in a supervisory capacity after the exile. Ne 11. 7, 9. 8. 1 In the inaugural march arranged by Nehemiah after the completion of Jerusalem's wall. Ne 12. 31, 34. 9. A priestly musician in the inaugural march. Ne 12. 31, 35, 36. Judah, wilderness of the generally uninhabited, barren eastern slope of the Judean mountains. JG 1. 16th This wilderness region, extending about 16 to 24 kilometers 10 to 15 mi in width, begins not far of the Mount of Olives and stretches some 80 kilometers 50 mi along the W coast of the Dead Sea. It mainly consists of smooth and rounded barren hills of soft chalk, cleft by torrent valleys and ravines. Pictures, Volume 1, pages 335, 747. Toward the Dead Sea, the rounded hills give way to rocky gorges, and the sea itself is faced by a wall of jagged cliffs. Dropping some 1,200 meters, 3,900 feet in 24 kilometers 15 mi, this wilderness is shielded from the rain-bearing west winds and therefore receives only limited rainfall. At the same time it is at the mercy of the dry winds that sweep in from the east, but when it does rain, water rushes through the otherwise dry torrent valleys, and for a few weeks in the rainy season the wilderness produces meager vegetation. David described the wilderness of Judah as a land dry and exhausted, where there is no water. PS 63. Sup. 1. No stream has its source in the heart of this arid region, and no surface water runs there. In sharp contrast, the stream issuing forth from Ezekiel's visionary temple flowed through this wilderness and supported trees in abundance along its banks. S 47. 1-10. It was undoubtedly into the desolate wilderness of Judah that the goat for Azazel was sent on the annual atonement day after being led there from the temple at Jerusalem. The 16. 21, 22. In the 1st century CE, John the Baptizer began his ministry in a section of this region and of the Dead Sea. Mount 3. 1-6. Apparently somewhere in this same wilderness Christ Jesus was tempted by the devil. Mount 4. 1. Judaism, Judah-Middle-Dodism. The Jewish religious system. Go 1. 13. 14. In the 1st century CE, Judaism in its various forms was not based exclusively on the Hebrew scriptures. One of the most prominent divisions of Judaism, that of the Sadducees, rejected the scriptural teaching of the resurrection and denied the existence of angels. Mr. 12. 18-27. Act 23. 8. Although the Pharisees, who formed yet another important branch of Judaism, sharply disagreed with the Sadducees on this Act 23. 6-9, they were guilty of making God's word invalid because of their many unscriptural traditions. Mount 15. 1-11. Not the law, which was actually a tutor leading to Christ. Go 3. 24, but these unscriptural traditions made it difficult for many to accept Christ. The law itself was good and holy. Row 7. 12, but the traditions of men served to enslave the Jews. Col 2. 8. It was an ardent zeal for the traditions of his fathers that caused Saul Paul to be a vicious persecutor of Christians. Go 1. 13, 14, 23. See Pharisees. Sadducees. Judas from Heb. A form of the name Judah. 1. An ancestor of Jesus in the line from Nathan through Mary. The son of Joseph and father of Simeon, Judas was the 7th generation from David's son Nathan, and so lived prior to the Babylonian exile. Luke 3. 30, 31. 2. Judas the Galilean, referred o textually acute muritra longo, Judas 129, 3. One of the 12 apostles, also called Thaddeus, and Judas the son of James. In the listings of the apostles in Matthew 10. 3 and Mark 3. 18. James the son of Alphaeus and Thaddeus are linked together. In the listings at Luke 6. 16 and Acts 1. 13. Thaddeus is not included. Instead we find Judas the son of James, leading to the conclusion that Thaddeus is another name for the apostle Judas. The possibility of confusing two apostles named Judas might be a reason why the name Thaddeus is sometimes used. Some translators render Luke 6. 16 and Acts 1. 13, Judas the brother of James, since the Greek does not give the exact relationship. But the Syriac Peshitta does supply the word son. Consequently, numerous modern translations read Judas the son of James. R.S. at N.W., or the only biblical reference to Judas alone is at John 14. 22. This verse refers to him as Judas, not Iscariot, thus providing a means of distinguishing which Judas spoke. In the King James Version at Matthew 10. 3. Lebbaeus, whose surname is inserted before Thaddeus. This is based on the received text, but the Westcott endorsed text omits this, for it is not in manuscripts such as the Sinaitic. 4. Judas Iscariot, the son of Simon and the infamous apostle who betrayed Jesus. The Bible provides little direct information about the family and background of Judas. Both he and his father were called Iscariot. Luke 6:16. Joe 6:71. This term has commonly been understood to indicate that they were from the Judean town of Kerioth Jezreel. If this is so, then Judas was the only Judean among the 12 apostles, the rest being Galileans. Judas is introduced into the Gospel accounts in the listing of the apostles sometime after Passover 31 CE and about a year and a half after Jesus began his ministry. Mr. 3:19. Luke 6:16. It is logical to conclude that Judas had been a disciple for a time before Jesus made him an apostle. Many writers paint an entirely black picture of Judas, but evidently for a while he has been a disciple who found favor with God and with Jesus. His very selection as an apostle indicates that. Furthermore, he was entrusted with caring for the common finances of Jesus and the 12. That reflects favorably on his dependability at the time and his ability or education, especially since Matthew had had experience with money and figures, but did not receive this assignment. Joe 12:6. Mount 10:3. Nonetheless, Judas did become completely, inexcusably corrupt. No doubt it is for this reason that he is placed last in the list of the apostles and is described as the Judas who later betrayed him and who turned traitor. Mount 10:4. Luke 6:16. Became corrupt. Near Passover 32 CE. Judas, with the other apostles, was sent out preaching. Mount 10:1-4-5. Shortly after Judas' return, and less than a year after he had been made an apostle, he was publicly denounced by Christ, though not by name. Some disciples left Jesus, being shocked over his teachings, but Peter said that the 12 would stick with Christ. In response, Jesus acknowledged that he had chosen the 12 but said, "One of you is a slanderer." Los, meaning devil or slanderer. The account explains that the one who already was a slanderer was Judas, who was going to betray him, although one of the 12. Joe 6:66-71. In connection with this incident, John says, "From the beginning Jesus knew who was the one that would betray him." Joe 6:64. From Hebrew scripture prophecies, Christ knew that he would be betrayed by a close associate. PS 41:9. 109. 8. Joe 13:18-19. God also, by use of his foreknowledge, had seen that such a one would turn traitor, but it is inconsistent with God's qualities and past dealings to think that Judas had to fail, as if he were predestined. See foreknowledge, foreordination. Rather, as already mentioned, at the beginning of his apostleship Judas was faithfully to God and to Jesus. Thus John mus o textoi acute miritra longo. Judas 130 times Satan entered into Judas, likely in the sense that the traitorous apostle gave himself into the will of the devil, allowing himself to be a tool to carry out Satan's design to stop Christ. A few days later, on Nisan 12, Judas went to the chief priests and temple captains to see how much they would pay him to betray Jesus, again showing his avarice. Mount 26. 14-16. Mr. 14. 10-11. Lu 22. 3-6. Joe 13. 2. The chief priests had that day met together with the older men of the people, the influential men of the Sanhedrin. Mount 26. 3. The temple captains may have been brought in because of their influence and to lend legal flavor to any planned arrest of Jesus. Why did the Jewish religious leaders offer just 30 pieces of silver for the betrayal of Jesus? 30 pieces of silver, $66, if shekels was the price offered. Mount 26. 14-15. The sum fixed by the religious leaders appears designed to show their contempt of Jesus, viewing him as of little value. According to Exodus 21:32, the price of a slave was 30 shekels. Carrying this forward, for his work as a shepherd of the people, Zechariah was paid 30 pieces of silver. Jehovah scorned this as a very meager amount, regarding the wages given to Zechariah as an estimation of how the faithless people viewed God himself. Zech 11:12, 13. Consequently, in offering just 30 pieces of silver for Jesus, the religious leaders made him out to be of little value. At the same time, though, they were fulfilling Zechariah 11. 12, treating Jehovah as of low value by doing this to the representative he had sent to shepherd Israel. Corrupt Judas consented to the price, and he began to seek a good opportunity to betray Jesus to them without a crowd around. Luke 22. 6. Last night with Jesus. In spite of having turned against Christ, Judas continued to associate with him. He gathered with Jesus and the apostles on Nisan 14:33 CE for the celebration of the Passover. While the Passover meal was in process, Jesus ministered to the apostles, humbly washing their feet. Hypocritical Judas allowed Jesus to do that to him. But Jesus said, "Not all of you are clean." Joe 13. 2-5, 11. He also stated that one of the apostles there at the table would betray him. Perhaps so as not to appear guilty, Judas asked if he was the one. As a further identification, Jesus gave Judas a morsel and told him to do quickly what he was doing. Mount 26. 21-25. Mr. 14. 18-21. Luke 22. 21-23. Joe 13. 21-30. Immediately Judas left the group. A comparison of Matthew 26. 20-29 with John 13. 21-30 indicates that he departed before Jesus instituted the celebration of the Lord's evening meal. Luke's presentation of this incident evidently is not in strict chronological order, for Judas had definitely left by the time Christ commended the group for having stuck with him. That would not fit Judas, nor would he have been taken into the covenant. For a kingdom. Luke 22. 19-30. Judas later found Jesus together with the faithful apostles in the Garden of Gethsemane, a place the betrayer knew well, for they had met there before. He led a great crowd, including Roman soldiers and a military commander. The mob had clubs and swords as well as torches and lamps, which they would need if clouds covered the full moon or if Jesus was in the shadows. The Romans probably would not recognize Jesus, so, according to a prearranged sign, Judas greeted Christ and in an act of hypocrisy kissed him very tenderly, thus identifying him. Mount 26. 47-49. Joe 18. 2-12. Later Judas felt the enormity of his guilt. In the morning he attempted to return the 30 pieces of silver, but the chief priests refused to take them back. Finally, Judas threw the money into the temple. O textoi acute miritra longo, Jude 131. The money was still considered to be Judas, and to have been applied by him in the purchase of the well-known potter's field. The Life and Times of Jesus the Messiah, 1906, Volume 2, p. 575. This purchase worked to fulfill the prophecy at Zechariah 11. 13. The course that Judas chose was a deliberate one, involving malice, greed, pride, hypocrisy, and scheming. He afterward felt remorse under the burden of guilt, as a willful murderer might at the result of his crime. Yet Judas had of his own volition made a bargain with those who Jesus said made proselytes that were subjects of Gehenna twice as much as themselves, who were also liable to the judgment of Gehenna. Mount 23. 15:33. On the final night of his earthly life, Jesus himself said, actually about Judas, "It would have been finer for that man if he had not been born." Later Christ called him the son of destruction. Mr. 14. 21. Joe 17. 12. Heb 10. 26-29. Replacement. Between Jesus' ascension and the day of Pentecost 33 CE Peter, applying the prophecy in Psalm 109. 8, explained to a group of about 120 assembled disciples that it seemed appropriate to select a replacement for Judas. 2 candidates were proposed and lots were cast, resulting in Matthias being chosen to take the place of this ministry and apostleship, from which Judas deviated to go to his own place. Act 1. 15, 16, 20-26. 5. One of Jesus' 4 half-brothers. Mount 13. 55. Mr. 6. 3 Evidently he was with his 3 brothers and his mother Mary early in Jesus' ministry when, at Cana, Jesus performed a miracle, and he later traveled with Jesus and his disciples to Capernaum for a short stay. Joe 2. 1-12 Well over a year later he apparently accompanied Mary and his brothers when they sought out Jesus. Mount 12. 46 Nonetheless, in 32 CE Jesus' brothers, including Judas, were not exercising faith in him. Joe 7. 5 Shortly before dying, Jesus turned his believing mother over to the care of the Apostle John, strongly suggesting that neither Judas nor his brothers had yet become disciples. Joe 19.